Ooh, a spicy question. I
because
love
the
it.
writing is sort of everything, right? Like you kind of can fix plot holes, but if the writing isn't
So some
there,
readers love that, and some readers are like, but I wanted more of this. So it's kind of a gamble.
Hello and welcome back to the Right and Wrong podcast. On this episode, I am with an author of dystopian and speculative romantic adventures, my good friend and co-host of The Chosen Ones and Other Tropes. It's Melissa Welliver. Welcome back.
Hello.
She's back.
I'm
As
back.
always,
Yeah, you can't get rid of me.
the new book coming out on the 26th of March. Tell us about your fourth novel, To the Death.
Yeah. So it is called To the Death, not the original title, which I never get to keep my titles, so that's fair enough. But the marketing team know what they're doing. So it's coming out with Hachette, their imprint, technically called Tempest, which they've only just changed. So I think on the side of some books, it actually still says Hodder. So they'll be worth loads of money, guys, when I'm rich and famous. So make sure you go out and get the first editions of the book. Think how much money they'll be worth. So it is about a girl called Astrid who lives on an island and has done for 8 years that is quarantined from the mainland because it is infested with zombies. They're sort of vampire zombie hybrids. They burn in the sun. I won't spoil too much because you can kind of discover what kind of monsters they are. And they are all recorded as sort of a nature program to start with, but it becomes sort of a monetized television show. And the producer of the show turns up on the island and they've decided to boost ratings. They're going to do a sort of battle royale style game show with favorites from the fans battling against zombies, and the winner gets a ticket off the island.
Very exciting. Very cool.
Yeah.
It's obviously dystopia, speculative fiction. That's like your home. That's what you like to write about. That's where you kind of live. But obviously a huge part of this is the reality TV element of it. Was there a specific reality TV show that you were watching at home in real life when you were starting to piece together the idea for this book?
Yes, The Traitors. I wrote it in January 2024.
Okay.
And that's when The Traitors, I think it was around the time that I said to you to start watching The Traitors, and then you watched like the back catalogue and you were texting me about it. So Traitors on in January. Yeah, that's right. So I was watching The Traitors. There are some homage, like gold envelopes in the book. It's quite funny because obviously it gets Hunger Games comparisons because it's a battle royale type book, but actually I would say much closer to Traitors. Has like puzzles and challenges that are not actually, a bit like in The Traitors, they're not really puzzles and challenges. They're more just there to humiliate the contestants and get them talking about certain things and get them doing certain things and get certain footage that they want to get. Yes, it's sort of created within a challenge sphere.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I thought it might be like a Love Island or something because it is on an island, you know. And
God, yeah. I mean, I love Love Island. I love reality TV. I watched Big Brother when I was like 10 or 11 when I should not have been watching it. Absolutely loved it. I remember finding out like certain celebrities would buy the Big Brother diary room chairs and I was so jealous. And I was like, when I'm a rich and famous writer, I'm going to buy one of the diary room chairs and like sit in it at my desk. And obviously I'm not rich or famous enough yet because I don't have one. Really sad. But one day. Yeah. Oh no, I love all of them. I love Love Island. I've seen pretty much all of them apart from the All-Star ones. Oh my God, yeah, I love reality TV. I love like Love is Blind and Married at First Sight, which are romance ones, which is interesting because obviously this, as you said at the beginning, I always have like a romance thread.
Yeah.
So I love like fake dating on TV. I love it. Delicious. My favorite.
Fake dating, a great trope as well. We talked about that one on Chosen Ones.
Yeah, it's so good.
You mentioned it, so I have to ask, what was the original title?
Oh yeah, so I just named after the game show. So the sort of show that they take part in is called Escape from Blood Island.
Oh I remember.
Yeah. So I kind of thought in my head, I was like, this could be a really cool series where every book is named after the TV show in question. Yeah. But I think in early conversations, it was something like they were worried it leaned, which is quite funny now because it's quite popular, but they were worried it was leaning too horror if it was called Escape from Blood Island. And they wanted it to lean like dystopian because it is horror because there's zombies and, fighting and stuff. And there's body horror in the book. But yeah,
Escape from Blood Island has a sort of like 80s kitsch horror kind of
actually,
vibe
that's
to it
true.
too, which is fun, but I can see why the marketing team went with this.
Yes, yeah. And also, I guess from a world building perspective, it's a bit simpler because obviously the island, when it was not infested with vampire zombie hybrids, was not called Blood Island. It's called Modi Mordi, which means like it's just Latin, slightly bastardized Latin for little bite, which of course technically is that is actually a reference to the zombie vampires. But I was just trying to call it, something completely different.
Something
but
interesting. Yeah. And then the sequel, you can call it To the Death, but TWO.
To the death. Perfect. Not what I called it.
Stupid.
I think 4 drafts where I was just sending it back and it just said To the Death 2 Electric Boogaloo along the top. And then eventually my editor had to say, so we're not going to call it that. I was like, all right, yeah.
That would be hilarious if you did call it that, though.
Yeah, that would be the tippy top.
Let's talk about dystopia.
Yeah.
I want to bring up something.
You mean the news? Okay.
Yeah, you mean contemporary news. No, I want to talk about something that you said in our Chosen Ones group chat.
Uh-oh. It's coming out of the group
Melissa's
chat.
getting very nervous.
The unhinged 3-person group chat.
No. It was what we were talking the other day, and it was something you had been thinking about, and you said you were thinking about how crime and romance as genres, that the stories are very similar, very repetitive, because part of those genres is that the fans are expecting certain things. Like most romance, it's going to be happily ever after. Most crime, that there's going to be a depressed kind of detective with issues in their own life, and then at the end they're going to solve the murder and probably not resolve the issues in their own life. Then fantasy caught some strays, and then you went on to say that you got a feeling that dystopia was held up to a slightly different lens, and it was scrutinized in a different way when people repeated the storylines and things from the genre. Yeah.
So it's definitely not the only genre that this happens in. This just happens to be my genre. So I see things within my genre, even when I'm avoiding my own reviews, which I try and do most of the time, other reviews as well, because obviously I'm reading them. So I'm going on and I'm seeing like the reviews. So obviously we have a Tropes podcast. I have absolutely no issue whatsoever with genres having a particular framework that they need to work within, and tropes and sort of regulations that you would expect. Like you say, in a romance, I can't really think of a romance where you're reading it and thinking, oh, I hope they get together, because obviously they're going to get together. That is part of the magic of reading a romance, is you are safe in the knowledge there's going to be a happily ever after. In fact, there are people that would argue it's not a romance, solid romance book in the genre if it doesn't have an HEA, right? So that's absolutely fine. Like, I don't mind that at all. I've watched stuff with hard-boiled detectives, and that's literally like an old like Detective Gumshoe type. Absolutely, like that's absolutely. There's no issue. I'm not saying there's an issue with that, and it's the same with fantasy. Quite a lot of fantasy, obviously, launches off the same fantasy creatures that appear in different things. For instance, horror does it quite a lot. Like, why would they go into the basement every time the call's coming from inside the house? Even zombie stuff, which obviously I love. Like, there's a big comparison. I remember whenever I see people watch the first, because 28 years later has come out recently, right? And a lot of people go back to 28 days. When they watch it and they see a bloke wake up from a coma in hospital, zombie apocalypse, they immediately go and Google which came first, Walking Dead or 28 Days Later, because it's really similar. And I do feel like sometimes in dystopia, the tropes that you use, and if you are using tropes, they can sometimes be held in quite a critical light, because I think dystopia, people are expecting every single story to be completely and utterly an original idea. And that's never going to happen anyway. Like, there's no. People always say there's no original ideas. I think that's probably a bit harsh. I do think there's more than 7 stories. I'm not a big fan of that, but I think, so for instance, I've written, obviously it's a battle royale story. There's quite a few of them about. I mean, battle royale itself literally comes from the book /film /manga, like battle royale.
Yes.
Where people are fighting till there's the last one, and also, of course, really popular in video games. A battle royale. Fortnite's battle royale. I think that there's an interesting thing in dystopia where sometimes if you use tropes from well-known other creations within the same genre, people think that it's less of a homage. This isn't necessarily something I've been accused of, but I do notice that people are quite happy to see the same sorts of characters, say in fantasy, I'll burn the world for you type characters, make me your villain type characters. I love make me your villain. Like, I love it. But I feel like sometimes if you want to use those tropes in dystopia, they're picked up. I think it's because of the political connotations of dystopia, and obviously usually holding up a mirror to the real world, which I think all books do to an extent. But I think dystopia, especially post Black Mirror, I think people are expecting a particular discourse around a dystopic book.
Yeah.
So I think it can be a bit tougher sometimes. There's a slightly tougher critical audience, I think, sometimes.
I guess I have a couple of things to say.
Yeah.
Firstly, I guess that there is something also inherently tied in with the fact that dystopia is most of the time speculative, which means it is the idea that this was the real world and this is like, you know, whether it's 20 years, 50 years, 100 years future or more. Mm-hmm. I think there is an idea of like, yeah, this was the real world. So we're going to be a bit more strict on how I kind of police it, if you know what I mean? Because I'm like, this is in quotes real. Yeah. Or like, you're posing that this was real. Well. Yeah, exactly. What I would say about fantasy is I feel like you're throwing fantasy in with romantasy. I think romantasy. Oh yeah,
you're right.
You're talking about romantasy tropes.
Yeah.
Fantasy. The interesting thing about fantasy is it's almost, if you look at who the biggest fantasy authors are and the ones who have really broken out, like your Joe Abercrombie's, even like George R. R. Martin when he first started writing.
Yeah.
They're taking the sort of Tolkien-esque setup that was created many, many years ago, and then they're doing everything in their power to keep it so you recognize it, but then subvert everything about it.
Okay. So
it's like your elves, you know, the elves are beautiful and attractive, but in this fantasy, the elves are like psychopaths who eat people.
Eat babies. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Or like, you know, Aragorn is this heroic character and everyone's quite honorable and kind of bands together in Lord of the Rings. And then in Joe Abercrombie, no one wants to be a part of the group. They're all forced to be there either through blackmail or just they didn't have any other option. The character who's sort of in the first Lore trilogy, at least, the character who's the sort of Gandalf character is clearly entirely, not necessarily evil, but entirely doing this for his own benefit and manipulating everyone around him to do it. So it's, I think, with fantasy generally what's becoming popular in fantasy is take the exact thing and then surprise people when it's not the thing they think it's going to be. The tropes you're talking about, which just makes me think of Ben Barnes, but whatever.
Yeah.
That's fully
OG Shadow
romantasy.
Daddies. Yeah,
exactly. That's full romantasy.
You're right, actually, which I think I was linking in because I think romance and crime in particular as the two easily, I would say, biggest genres on Kindle Unlimited. Mm-hmm. I would say they're the ones that people really love to find a similar thing. So they finish a whole detective series and they want to find another detective series, or they finish, a particular type of romance. They want to find more Regency romance, whatever it may be. So I think that's why I folded it in there. I think you're probably right. Yeah, I probably am just talking about romancy because romance lends itself to all these tropes because that's what the people want. So
yeah, romance fits into every genre. But the nice thing about crime and romance is because they've been in that spot for such a long time, I feel like they've really found their rhythm with those things where it's like you can read lots of romance and whilst there is an inherent similarity, there's like the authors are very good at, and the things that agents are finding and the publishers are finding is that they're doing the things that are different are like wonderfully different. They're very interestingly different, and that's that kind of. I think romantasy is still young enough as a kind of popular genre. I think it's absolutely going to fit into along with the main romance and the crime stuff, but I think it needs a bit more time before it gets out of almost its own way. Where like you say, there's so many shadow daddy characters where they're kind of almost verbatim saying the same thing in the same scene, and it's like we love a trope. We love a there's only one bed. We love enemies to lovers, but it's like it would be nice to kind of have the way it's delivered change a bit more, I think, between the books. And I'm sure
It's
it
the
does. I
voice.
don't read widely, and I'm sure there's lots that is happening, but there's a lot where it is almost shot for shot the same. Like if you made the TV show or the movie, it would just be basically the same scene playing out.
Yes.
Yeah, to conclude, I think you're potentially right. I think people are too eager to look for comparisons with dystopia and be like, oh, well, this is just that. And I'm like, well, yeah, but everything's just something else.
Yeah, and I think it's the way that obviously things are. I see quite a lot on, I'm on Book Talk, lurking, and I do see quite a lot of discourse about people really dislike that publishers say it's this meets this, right? So my publisher is pushing To the Death as, at the time I sold it, The Last of Us was basically on, like at that time. And obviously it's running scary zombies of sorts, and obviously we have the Hunger Games because it's a battle royale type thing, so they're saying, oh, it's the Hunger Games meets The Last of Us, and people really hate that, and I think it's an interesting part of being a traditionally published author. I do absolutely understand why they use it. I think it's a good thing to help people. Oh, if you're a fan of this, you will like this. That's what they're really saying. They're really saying, oh, you love, like, you know, if you were friends with somebody and you know that they love Regency romance and you know that they've not seen Bridgerton, you blow, oh my God, I can't believe you've not seen Bridgerton. Like, it's like this. And you would use a comparison of one of their favorite things to tell them what it was like. Everybody does it. But I do understand why people feel like it's like very derivative and it kind of rips out some soul pieces. And it's not necessarily what the author was thinking when they were writing it. But it's to help market the book to the correct audience. So I do understand the discourse around it, but I also do think it's useful. And I think that also doesn't help when people are making comparisons to other things. If the publisher is saying, yeah, it is like this. And then they're like, oh, it is like this. It's like, yes, so that's why I thought you might enjoy it. Someone else might think, oh, this is too similar to something else I was enjoying. You know, I've had actually enough of this trope, or I've had enough of this style of reality TV show. This is actually too similar. And that's fair enough. You know, that's why I don't read reviews, because like, that's when you get into, of course, you can get into reviews where, you know, someone's like 5-star, I cried all the way through, and someone says, I didn't care about a single character, I DNF'd. So like, people have different opinions on things, obviously.
That's it.
Yeah.
Because everyone's going to take something different from it. And I think that's an interesting point where, you know, if your book is being pushed as Hunger Games meets The Last of Us, people are going to take different things from that. It's quite interesting because when I speak to agents, and I often talk about, agents love to see a comparison title, because what they want from your cover letter is they want to know sort of succinctly what to expect when they read your manuscript.
Right.
So comparison titles are great, but
that's where it starts.
They'll often say is they won't say like, you know, unless it's very obvious, they won't say like, oh, it's Jurassic Park meets It. They'll
sounds
say
so good.
like, that was just off the dome right there. They'll say something like, you know, it's the specific relationships between the characters in one of these things combined with the kind of world and setting of the other. So with something like The Last of Us, if I were to say like, oh, it's like the setting of The Last of Us, that's very different from me saying, oh, the comparison is, it's like the relationship between Ellie and Joel in The Last of Us. Because it could be, you know, I could say Last of Us meets Jurassic Park, and then I'm like, oh, and it's the relationship between Ellie and Joel from The Last of Us, but it's the setting of
But life
Jurassic
finds
Park.
a way from Jurassic Park.
But life finds a way, yeah.
I don't know what to tell you.
But it's just a theme park, so
Yeah, it's just set in a theme park. Yeah, that's a tricky bit.
So I can see why people wouldn't love like a comparison if they're expecting one thing from that, and then they're like, oh, this isn't what I thought it was. Like if they pick up your book and they're expecting like a sort of found family father-daughter relationship.
That's true.
And that's not there.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think that the problem with because you've got to catch people's attention. So I understand you only have a few words to catch someone's attention and say, this is the book you want to look at, because there's literally tens, if not hundreds of thousands of books being published every year in the English language. Just in fiction alone. So you've got very little amount of time to capture someone's attention. But no, I totally agree. I think, and I also do think Hunger Games, and this is as somebody who has a Hunger Games book comparison and loves the Hunger Games, I do think it's massively overused as the only dystopian title, which brings us like back round to what I was saying about, I think people who read dystopia, maybe sometimes it's very easy to make connections to other things, and those things are definitely a homage in those books. Like, you can't write dystopian and have not read The Hunger Games. That would be mad. I can't imagine anyone writing dystopian and not have read The Hunger Games, because it is a seminal text in the genre.
Yeah.
I totally understand that. And so, of course, there's always going to be little nods to things within that text. However, yeah, I just think that sometimes we're quite quick to, this is also a discourse on TikTok, actually. We're quite quick to say, oh, this person's copied this. I remember when Divergent came out, before I read it, loads of people kept saying, it's copied The Hunger Games. It's exactly the same as The Hunger Games. And then I read it and thought,
It's nothing like The Hunger Games.
Same. Like, yeah, I didn't really understand. I mean, I did, obviously, like, logically speaking, I understand people are saying, oh, it's a female character who's this age and is quite standoffish and has to prove herself and leads a revolution. And I'm like, yeah. But to me, that's a trope I just expected. So it wasn't something that bothered me that it was there. So yeah, everyone's just different. That's the thing you've got to accept. Once your book goes out into the world, people make their own decisions and you've just got to kind of back off.
Yeah. And I mean, if the book's good and the word of mouth is good around it and it gets buzz, then the description of it will change and it will shape itself anyway.
Yes, that's so true. I would say 28 years later is much closer to My Zombies now, but this book sold in like first third of 2024. Yeah. So I don't even think the first one had come out yet of 28 years later. Whereas now, I'd definitely say 8 years later is probably a better comparison title. So it's interesting, isn't it? Things change.
It's just the zeitgeist too, because the marketing team is trying to pick up on the thing that's popular at the time.
Right, exactly.
Because not only, like you said, thousands of books coming out at any one time, but also because of the way book publishing works, your window for your kind of launch marketing is going to be the most marketing your book will probably ever get. There's other reasons why that might not be true, but for the most part, when your book comes out, that's the most marketing it'll ever get, because your publisher needs to move on to the other books they're publishing. They need to like redirect that team and things like that.
Yes.
So it's not only that there's so many books coming out for the whole year, it's that the time is that the biggest push your book's ever going to get is that initial launch.
Yes, of course, because then they're hoping that, you know, the one thing publishers can't buy, and I'm sure would love to buy, is word of mouth. And it's I would say like, it's like 50% of the trajectory of your book will be word of mouth, like just people recommending it to each other.
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely. I've got a couple more questions before we... Oh, I've changed it now. That's great. You haven't been on since I changed it from the desert island. Anyway, here's one for you. So if we go take a little trip down memory lane, your first novel came out 2020?
2021.
Printing of Undying Tower? 2021.
Yeah, 2021.
How vividly can you remember the writing process for each of your... This is your fourth novel, so for each of your novels, that's like The Undying Tower 2021, My Love, Life and the Apocalypse, Soulmates and Other Ways to Die.
Yeah.
How vividly can you remember writing each of those? And like, does it change as you go forward, or are some books more kind of memorable than others?
So like, obviously every time you start a book, you're like, I don't understand what to do. Where is the instruction booklet from last time? I am panicking. There's no way. You write the first 1,000 words, it takes 2 days. You think, oh my God, how am I ever going to get this done? So like, definitely every book has a similar start in that you absolutely are certain you've never written a book before. It's the most bizarre thing, actually. Like, it's just, even though I'm a plotter, and so I have like a framework I can use to start with, it still feels like you've never done it before. I think with my books, so yeah, I've got 4 that are sort of slated, if you like. And then I've just done the next one in my contract, and I've written an uncontracted one. So that's like 6. And then there's also ones that are never going to see the light of day. And you definitely remember the ones better that I'm very much a fan of. The writing comes in the rewriting. Like, I really think, don't get me wrong, it's a huge achievement to get down a first draft. It's very important. I mean, it's step 1 of the entire book process. But the writing comes in the rewriting, which is why actually it does bug me when people say they use, like, quite heavily rely on, say, AI to help them rewrite something, like, oh, I just feed in the odd sentence, or I had a plot hole, so I just asked AI. And the problem is, not only is AI probably not going to come up with something as good as you can come up with yourself, but there is something that happens in your brain. I'd love to study this. I think it'd be interesting. There's something that happens in my brain where I'm stuck on something for several days. and then I'll just be like making a sandwich, or I think you and Naomi often say like, oh, I was on a run and I suddenly realized how to fix this problem.
Yeah.
And there is something about your brain actually creating those like synaptic responses to create a solution to a problem that you just don't get otherwise. So I do think you remember those books better, the ones that you decide to go on and say, yeah, there's something here. I'm going to edit this. I'm going to develop it over an amount of time. Undying Tower, I didn't plot. So it was really long, the process. It took like over a year. And so I do remember it quite well. And I remember all the old iterations and all that kind of stuff. Love Life I wrote during COVID when I had literally nothing else to do. I was so bored. And I remember I was trapped upstairs because it was really, really hot. And we didn't have a garden. We lived somewhere where we didn't have a garden. We were renting this place. And my partner was a teacher, and he was online all day, every day, teaching. And the only office we had, because he'd never really been a work from home person, and I had a laptop, so I would just, sit on the bed all the time, which is really bad for your back. And so we had we had to quickly set up an office. And that ended up being in our hallway between like me and the kitchen and being outside. So I was kind of trapped upstairs with the bathroom. And so I would just sit there all day with nothing to do. So I do remember quite vividly writing that one because I was so bored. Soulmates, I do not remember as much because I think I pitched it and I wanted to get my new contract. And that was one of the first ones where I felt like I was in that rolling contract mode, even though it hadn't been contracted yet. So I was like pitching it, talking to the publisher, trying to get a first draft down as, less a haste, more speed. Trying to get it down quickly, but in a coherent way. So I don't remember that one as much. And then I worked with the publisher to edit it. So it was a bit different. And then, definitely To the Death, I remember quite well because, it was one of I got to a point where I started writing books in January, a first draft, a really awful first draft in January, not a finished book. And I just remember that one because my agent was really excited about it, and Lucy kept texting me when she was reading sections saying it was really exciting and she really loved it. So I do remember that because I was getting loads of praise, because at the end of the day I am nothing if just a girl / golden retriever, so I just like laying on the praise. So I definitely remember those ones, but nothing quite prepares you for the fact you do forget how to write a book before starting the new one though. Like you forget how to do it.
Yeah, I've heard that. And then I've heard a lot of authors saying like, and it doesn't matter how many books you write. Adrian Tchaikovsky said this. I keep talking about him because he was an interesting guy.
I was going to say, why not?
I keep bringing him up in almost all my interviews now. But he was saying like, he's obviously internationally successful, incredibly critically acclaimed.
Yeah, I've heard of him.
And he still, I've heard of him. He still says like when he starts a book, he still gets that kind of feeling of like, how do I do this? Like maybe I can't do this. Maybe it was just lucky. All the other like 30 times or whatever I did this.
Yeah, it's bizarre. I think it's just getting an idea. It's the same literally right now as I'm answering your questions. People often say like, oh, you're a writer, say something in this poignant moment, or something happens and they say, oh, you say something. You're a writer, you've written comedy, say something funny. It's like, no, if you want me to do something funny, I need like 6 weeks. Like a wine box probably. Loads and loads of biscuits and stuff. I need my computer. I need, it doesn't come to me that naturally. So even as I'm like speaking to you right now, for instance, and having to think of the answers because I'm not editing as I go and making sure everything makes sense. I think sometimes when you have an idea in your head and you really want to get it onto paper, it is that there's a meme online where it's like, idea in my head, it's a beautiful horse, like muscular, flowing mane in the wind type thing. And then like on paper, it's like a child's drawing of a horse with 6 legs and gets the tail. And it does feel like that because there's so much to get out of your head onto the page. It can feel overwhelming. And I think that's where that terror starts with the blank. There's nothing worse than a blank page. Like it's the worst bit before you've done anything at all. It's the worst, which is why a lot of people, I think, also don't often finish their first drafts and keep going back and editing. Because they're like, at least I have something here, whereas there's no better feeling than the second draft, in my opinion, where you have a whole book, even if it's rubbish, you have the whole thing. So you could go back and you could be like, okay, I've got something to work with here, as opposed to absolutely nothing.
Yeah. There's definitely something to be said for everyone loves to write the end and be like, whew, first draft done. And then you'll probably wait a day or so because then you look at the word count and you're like, that's a lot of editing.
Yeah. Yeah, and like just looking at cutting things, it's an interesting part of the process, because I always think I remember that better, and I think that's where you really start to make those connections in your head
Yeah.
about the story, as opposed to just trying to get something out of your head onto paper, and not just onto paper, but in a way that someone who isn't you would understand what's happening, which just feels like an impossible task.
Yes, it's even more possible because the part where it's like someone other than you wouldn't understand, and it works both ways, because also if you're trying to write something which is like a twist or like a reveal, and then you're like, no, what if I'm saying too much here? What if it's going to be too obvious? And then they're going to be like, I'm going to do this thing as if it's a big reveal, and then the reader's just going to be like, yeah, duh.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes, that's such a big one. That most of my notes, because I'm a plotter, so I'm not necessarily thinking about those bits when I write the first draft. So many of my notes, like developmental notes, are always like somebody saying, this was such a big surprise when this was revealed, to the point where I literally don't even understand how it's possible this character is the murderer or is the mole. And then I also get the absolute flip, which is, it was a lovely reveal scene. I had guessed it on page 2. Maybe less breadcrumbing. And it's like, okay. So yeah, exactly. That kind of stuff then kicks in. Yeah.
Which makes you, as a reader, makes me so appreciate when I read something that's like a clever reveal or a clever twist, and you're like, damn, you foreshadowed that perfectly, where I was just about to get there, and just as you revealed it, I was like, yes, that was it. That was on the tip of my tongue.
Yeah, I always say that I think you should have, says the person who always says I never get the twist because I don't do a lot of this kind of genre. But I always think if you do a twist, it needs a 10% hit rate. Like, I reckon if 10% of readers have got it, that's a really well hidden twist, because you want some people to get it, because you want it to be gettable. And you want some people to go, yes, I got it, and feel really pleased with themselves for being so smart. And then you want the other 90% to be berating themselves for being dumb. That's what you want.
Yeah. That's exactly what you want. Yeah. You want people to be like, my God, I should just stop reading at this point because I'm not worthy. No, but a part of me is like, there's some Agatha Christie stuff. And look, I think Agatha Christie's great and one of the best-selling authors of all time. But there's some stuff where I'm like, you cheated. You know, it was not possible for me to solve this crime. It's why I didn't love Murder on the Orient Express.
I was going to say, you going to say Murder on the Orient Express? Because I'd never read it, but I watched the film and was like, really?
It's like you broke the rules. We had like an unwritten contract that you were going to give me clues, and there would be a chance that I could guess which of the people did the murder. And I felt cheated the first time I saw. I was like, "What do you mean?" So anyone I guessed was technically correct.
Like, because spoilers. It's everyone. Why? And then you wonder with those, like, did she think of that from the beginning? Or did she decide later, like, absolute curveball? Because we've all done that, like, quite often. My mentees, so I work as like a book coach as well. People haven't already heard me 5 million times on this podcast. And quite often they'll say, first chapters, that's the most important bit to grab an agent or an editor or even a reader to buy the book. We've all read books where it's got a great first half and then maybe it doesn't stick the landing. And then you just kind of close it going, meh. But also you've already paid for the book, so it's already shot up the charts or whatever. They say, first chapters are so important, and they are. But often it's a number of times it's like the last thing I've written, really late in the process. And so you wonder sometimes how much people think, this is going to be the opening in advance. Like the one that I'm going to be going on submission with shortly, that it must have had like 5 different opening chapters. And then obviously that changes the whole vibe of the book because it's the opening chapter. So it's like your first impression. So I don't know how much people, like with the twists and stuff, how much they think I'm going to change this later, because obviously you need to breadcrumb it. So I'm never quite sure. Or do they know the twist? I don't know.
It's interesting because I've had so many different people telling me about different things like that. Like I had Ariel Sullivan on the other day. She writes, she's more of a pantser, but she does sort of, kind of checkpoint the book, but she writes the last chapter first and then she starts and she writes chronologically from there, which I thought was interesting in terms of, I think most people tend to add breadcrumbs in redrafts and edits, but I can't remember who it was. I had a sci-fi author on and it was Nicholas Binge, episode 218, would randomly throw breadcrumbs not knowing where they were going to lead. later on in the book, throughout his chapters as he was writing. In one of his books, he had a countdown going at the start of each chapter, and he didn't know, as I was writing it, I didn't know what this countdown was going to be, and then I figured it out later on. So I think, there's no, like we always say, there's no one way of doing it. There's no correct way of doing it.
No.
Just find a way that works for you.
Yeah. And I think it's always interesting hearing how different people do it. And then if they, as you were saying, like writing the new book, if they do repeat the same method for the new book. Yeah. And then as we were talking about, when you compare like different books and stuff and think, oh, this is the same as this book, has it been copied from X? And sometimes you copy stuff from your own books, obviously, because you're under contract. You've got to get the book written. Yeah. So you may lift stuff from your previous experience and put it in the book, which I think is quite interesting.
Yeah. And I can't tell you how many psychological thriller authors I've had on who every time I get a psychological thriller on, I'm like, no, surely you are a planner. They're all pantsers. They literally are all pantsers, and they don't know who did it until they've finished the book. They find out halfway through like what the twist is and stuff. And I'm like, how are you writing in this genre so chaotically?
I suppose that's where the rewriting comes in though, right? Like we were talking about. Yeah. Is that's when they're going to finesse that entire storyline and work out where those red herrings were that they obviously probably just drop at some point because they realize it's not that person. And it's like, this character disappears after chapter 12. Oh, right. Yeah. I probably should put them back in.
Maybe that's also the secret to why the twists are often so like good, because
that's what I was wondering.
If you've planned it and you're going in and you're like, you are kind of, I don't know, if you don't know, it's going to be so shocking even to you.
Yeah. And it depends what you want to say as well. So obviously we're talking about, again, like genres where perhaps maybe the theme of today is, are there any original stories left? And I think whatever you want to say also comes into, what makes it original. I've been tagged in some reviews, which are quite nice, because people, when they tag you in a nice review, obviously I do go and have a look. I try and avoid reviews. And a lot of people have picked up some of the stuff I was trying to say that is, say, very different from Dystopian being written in the 2010s that I was reading, which was covering very different topics with that big heyday in the 2010s, is there is a entire situation where there's an island of people who need help and they really want to get across the small channel to the other island, but it's patrolled by boats that get shot out of the water if they try and make it across. Okay. And the government is not helping them. And so obviously that's maybe something that wouldn't have crept in. And I don't even know if I did that consciously to start with. I noticed it halfway through, I think. And you start to think, did this probably would not have crept in earlier, because that's obviously a real world thing I'm thinking about that has crept into the text. So I always think that's interesting as well. Things that creep in just from the process of writing. So whether it be a twist or whether it be just things around you, or watching The Traitors and thinking, oh, I'd love to have a golden envelope challenge, or even anything silly like that. These things that creep in through the writing process that wouldn't work if you weren't actively writing it over a period of time. Because that's the other problem is I write my drafts quite quickly, but some people write over a year, and that is, it has pros and cons over writing in a month, because obviously also you're getting influenced by outside things over that year.
Yeah. And everything you're reading in that space as well. I know a lot of authors try not to read when they're at different stages of their writing, or they'll read out of genre, or God forbid, they'll read nonfiction. No, we love nonfiction. We are at the point in the episode where I used to ask people which book they would take if they were stranded on a desert island, but I don't know if I warned you about this, but the new question is, Melissa, if you were snowed in at a cozy woodland cabin in the middle of nowhere, which book would you hope to have with you?
Oh no. Cozy woodland cabin is the one throwing me. So I am a beach reader. Like the rest of the year, I prioritize books like I've been sent to blurb, right? And even though I really enjoy those books, I don't say yes to books unless I look like they look really fun and I'm going to enjoy them. And also I'm very lucky that the publicists that approach me usually know that I am a dystopian girly and I'm quite set in my genre. So they give me books that I would be really interested in. Honestly, books I choose for myself, I read when I'm in a sunny setting. Like, I'm not a ski girl. I am an après ski girl. I would enjoy the cabin part of this lodge whilst everyone's out in the avalanche outside being rescued by helicopter and I'm sat inside the cozy lodge. So that's the bit I'm struggling with, because I also have very recently got into like seasonal reading. So I'm thinking,
Okay.
like, would I want to read a Christmassy book? Like, Andrina Cordani has all these locked room, well, some of them are locked room, but murder mystery books. Like, she's got the Scrooge mysteries and, oh gosh, all sorts of ones. Like, ones where they're trapped in a toy shop, which actually felt a bit like Saw. I love Saw. And, like, they're, like, picking them off one by one, all these bad people in this toy shop, and it's Christmas. So I feel like I might want to read something seasonal, or actually, after watching Heated Rivalry like 5 times, I would maybe want like one of the ice hockey, ice skating romance type ones.
Okay.
Yeah. Like,
there's plenty.
Yeah, like Finding Her Edge. I just watched. I would like to read those. They look really fun. So yeah, I think I would take those if I knew I was going to be snowed into this cabin. Yeah. I feel like I want something like that matches the vibe outside.
Okay, so like a Christmas or an ice hockey.
Yeah. So maybe I'd read all the Heated, because I know there's a few Heated Rivalry ones, or Finding Her Edge.
5,
like
the
that.
Challengers series. And
maybe I'd read those. That's what I would read, because I haven't read them yet. That would keep me going. Am I allowed more than one? Sorry, I've cheated.
Well, I don't know how long they are. If you can bind them all together, you can take as many as you can bind. That's always been my rule.
Together.
Okay, great. You know what's I love this new question, because it's getting very different answers to people being stranded on a desert island.
I went too prepper for that one. I've clearly given up.
You
took
the Argos catalogue.
I did take the Argos catalogue, which shows how long I've been coming on here, because that has gone.
It's funny. I get a surprising amount of horror. People seem, because I think they feel much safer in this environment. They're like, oh, I'll take a horror book.
Oh wow, yeah.
Yeah, but no one's taking horror to the desert island. So
yeah, that's true. Desert Island does feel scarier. Yeah, because you did say I was like snowed in, so that could be really dangerous, but I'm clearly ignoring it to read Heated Rivalry, so that seems fine.
Yeah, I mean, you might as well have fun with it, though.
Yeah, I mean, if it's my last few hours on Earth. Like...
Next up, we are going to pick up a bit on where we left off. We're going to go a bit back and talk about the sort of publishing process throughout Melissa's career, and then I've got some sort of rapid fire. I said some sort of, I'm reading my notes as if for the first time here. I've got some more rapid fire questions about industry stuff, which we're going to discuss. That will all be available in the extended episode on patreon.com/right and wrong. If I went to someone's bookshelf and it was just a row of sprayed edges, I'd be like, what is this? What am I looking at?
Yeah, where's the actual book? Yeah, because it's not always obvious from the sprayed edge what the book is.
It's almost never obvious what
it's
very edge.
So it is a weird one. Yeah. And do they remember? Maybe they do.
Oh, they probably do. I don't know. But that brings us to the end of the episode. Thank you so much, Melissa, for coming on and chatting with us and catching up and telling us all about your new book, To the Death, which is out on the 26th of March. It's been, as always, a pleasure to chat with you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me.
And for anyone listening, if you want to keep up with what Melissa is doing, you can find her on TikTok at Melissa Welliver and on everything else at Melliver. And she has a website, melissawelliver.com. To support this podcast, follow and subscribe. Also, follow my other podcast, The Chosen Ones and Other Tropes, for even more Melissa. And make sure you join the Patreon for ad-free extended episodes. Thanks again, Melissa. Thanks to everyone listening. We will catch you on the next episode.